Welcome to the Cyber Agony Aunt podcast series, brought to you by your very own cyber aunties, me, Amelia Hewitt.
And me, Rebecca Taylor. We're here to tackle the most pressing questions that arise throughout your cyber career with a selection of very special guests.
Think of us as your very own mentors, confidants, and cheerleaders, your agony aunts for surviving your career. Hello and welcome back to the Cyber Agony Aunt podcast.
Hey team, it's nice to be back.
Yeah, for sure. It always feels like these recordings are too far apart, but also always feels like there's one coming up soon.
No, I agree. But yes, we're back to business and we have some new guests that we've brought with us for this series. So I'm going to start with a nice little introduction. For this episode, we have invited a subject matter expert in the crypto world, an influential female who focuses on crypto and crypto scams, digital assets, and the ethics that sit around the use of artificial intelligence. So many beautiful buzzwords there. We're very excited. On top of this, she is also a well-known author and a TEDx speaker. So lovely guest, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hi, well, thank you both for having me on. So I'm Erica Stanford. Yes, I wrote a book about crypto scams called Crypto Wars, Fake Deaths, Missing Billions and Industry Disruption. I had to remember the name there. A while ago, I work at a law firm, CMS, so we've built up a large crypto team. We've hired a bunch of crypto lawyers. So we've got a crypto-specific practice. So that's sort of the full-time day job. So I focus on the risk and what can go wrong, and also the sort of the industry side of crypto. Work in crypto there. We also do a lot in AI. I'm doing a master's alongside in AI and data ethics, which is really, really sort of interesting. And it's all about what can go wrong in AI. And I am currently training for crossing across Antarctica. So that's next year. It will be 4 months, 2,100 kilometers. So pretty much all of my free time is going towards training and preparing for that.
Blimey, so only moderately busy.
Yeah,
only just a little bit. Yeah. So obviously, as we've suggested already today, we're going to be talking about the world of cryptocurrency. Now, we know that some of our listeners will obviously be well versed in the topic. We do have cybersecurity professionals that are listening in on this. But for others that are maybe not so familiar, they might be seeing that word a lot. They might be seeing the topic of cryptocurrency spoken about a lot, like in the media, but they might not quite understand it or how it works. So our first question to you, Erica, we just want to level set for everyone listening. Can you share with us what cryptocurrency is, how it might be used, and how you first got into researching cryptocurrency as a topic?
Yeah, sure. So starting in backwards order for those, how I got interested in crypto. I was traveling Latin America a lot. So the summer before uni, I went to Latin America and was backpacking around. And then every summer during uni, I just went off there with a backpack and spent all summer there and did a year abroad there. So I had 8 months based in Buenos Aires and Argentina and backpacking around there. And there's a few things that sort of routinely happen. So I got mugged many times. So one summer I was in Guatemala, I was completely alone, off-piste. I was a tiny little blonde thing and got mugged 4 times in a row within the space of a couple of weeks, and ended up having all of the cards and traveller's checks and everything I'd taken with me stolen. So I had to go to the nearest Western Union and call my dad. And my kind, loving dad found a Western Union local to where they lived and went there and sent me money, and then proceeded to have to do that for the rest of the summer. And, one thing about sending remittances, and crypto has made it better, but we can get onto that. But it's a really extortionate way of basically screwing over the poorest people in the world. The whole industry is. So at the time, it charged 14% to send money and took 3 days. So you had to wait for your money. And then they took 14% or 4%. And then you got that in cash. And, cash is the last thing you want when you've just been mugged a load of times.
Yeah.
But also you see how expensive it is. And there was a series of things just by living and traveling around Latin America. And I've got family in Mexico also. And where you just see that traditional finance doesn't always work. and doesn't work for everybody. And it's easy to think, I'm based in London and one's in a little bubble where mostly you get paid digitally and you can tap things with your iPhone and it works. And you can press buy now on your Amazon and it works. And it's all very seamless. But that's not how the whole world works. And a lot about money doesn't work and doesn't work for everyone and definitely doesn't work fairly. And there's some really high costs. So when I heard about crypto, straight away, I could see like there's just a huge potential, a way of sending money that is outside of the system, a way of sending money that's a lot cheaper, where you don't have to rely on third parties, where you can send money direct from A to B, where you're not held up by any of the third-party limitations. So that's a long-winded way of how I got interested in crypto, just by basically seeing traditional money really doesn't always work and definitely isn't always fair, and you really can't trust the system. So what is crypto? Crypto it's two things. So firstly, it's digital money. It's a way of sending and storing money outside of the system. So you store money, it's all recorded on blockchain, it's a distributed ledger technology. So what that means in practice, unlike where you might store money in a bank where you're basically dependent on a centralized entity, you have to trust that bank and you're trusting them that they've got your money and that the amount of money that they tell you you've got is what you've actually got there. On blockchain, you've got a far more transparent way of seeing what you've got. So you can see what value you've got. And you can see when you send a transaction that it's actually been sent and that it's been received by the address it's been sent to. So you've got a lot more transparency over it. And you're also not dependent on trusting a third-party centralized companies. It's a bit of a peer-to-peer system. So what is crypto? It's digital money. It's a store of value that is outside of the traditional financial system as we know it. And also what is crypto? It's a direct response to the problems in the traditional financial system. And it's a direct response to the fact that we can't trust banks and we certainly can't trust governments. So when Bitcoin was created and Bitcoin came out in 2009, one of the sort of lines of, it's basically like a line of writing written into the code in the opening block, was a direct response showing that this was at the time of just after the financial crash. It was a response to that. And when you look at it in that way, you can see that what crypto is, it's a way of being able to store money that you hold, that you don't have to trust anyone else for, that you can send to anywhere in the world that you want to send it without being blocked by all of the limitations that traditional finance and governments put on.
I want to start by just saying that answer was incredible. And it genuinely shows your passion and your depth and breadth of knowledge around it. I want to say as well that I'm sorry you were a victim of crime 4 times in a row, because that must have been scary, particularly on your own in a different country. So I do want to say I'm sorry that happened to you. But what I find interesting most about your response is, I suppose with my line of work where I'm looking at cybercrime, I maybe see more of the negative side of cryptocurrency. I've never really had anyone explain it to me in such a positive way before, where the benefits of it, if that makes sense. I normally get the negative spin. So it was really nice to hear how it can be used in a good way and actually why it was born, I suppose, as well.
Oh, crypto is great. I mean, it genuinely is. It's a phenomenal technology and concept, hence why I'm still working in it and interested. But no, it really isn't. You asked about use cases and there's so many. And one of them is sending money. And one of the things with crypto is you can send big amounts. Mm-hmm. There's $1 billion transactions that can be sent for a matter of single-digit dollars. You can't do that with traditional finance. And also you can send micro amounts. You can send less than 1p or less than 1 cent, or even tiny amounts like 1p here, 1p there, which you can't do with traditional finance digitally. You can do it with cash. I can give you 1p coin. I don't have any. But you can't do that digitally because the costs are too high. Whereas through crypto, you've got an enormous amount of potential. So what that means is you can send microtransactions, you can send super large payments, but you can do so securely, knowing that you can see exactly where that money has been sent and received. So if you send $1 billion transaction, nobody can deny that they received that transaction. The proof is in the blockchain. But it also opens up so many more opportunities. So I touched on remittances earlier. Since crypto and Bitcoin came out, the average cost of remittances has more than halved, which is amazing because that's saving billions of dollars for the poorest people in the world. So what it means is you can send small amounts, maybe if that's off your daily paycheck, that's for gig earners, microinsurance, and all of these capabilities are now possible because you can send these micro amounts of money digitally without it really costing anything to do so. So it opens up a huge amount of potential use cases.
I think it's fascinating. I mean, both Rebecca and I are completely in awe because much like Rebecca, I have heard a lot of negatives. And I think that with any technologies, there are obviously drawbacks and positives. But the part that really stands out for me is that it almost closes that gap slightly between populations, because there is a lot to be said. There are a lot of people in the non-Western world who send smaller amounts of money on more frequent basis. Why should they have to be charged, extortionate fees to do that? So now that we've sort of level set, and we spoke about the positives, we know that you in your work and as part of your book have done a lot of research into crypto scams. So what can they look like, and what are those sort of psychological levers that scammers are pulling to try and be effective with their victims?
So crypto scams, it's a big topic. So there's one answer, which in a way is that most crypto scams aren't crypto scams.
Sure.
They're traditional scams, traditional crime that use crypto as an easier way of extracting money or of laundering that money. But to put it into a topic, crypto scams can be everything. There's loads of scams out there. And most crypto scams, to sort of iterate that point, all of these scams would still be there if there weren't crypto. They would find just another way of extracting victims' money. But there's a whole range of scams. And that it's a really sad thing because now it's often harder and harder and harder to know what is a scam and what isn't. So you've got, on one side, you've got romance scams where people spend ages, we're talking months, or in some cases years, basically grooming their victims. They go on dating sites or online to find people that are vulnerable, send out bulk messages, because you only need to find one person who's vulnerable enough. And then they spend months and months and months talking to this person and building up a relationship. And so, and then either it used to be that they would persuade them to send the money, but now more and more people have cottoned on to that. So now more where the romance scams go is building up hope for a future. So they'll say something like, well, if we only had enough money to be together, if I've invested in this phenomenal crypto platform and I've got loads of returns, and if you do that too, then we'll have enough money to have a future together, to have a house together, for you to come and see me. So that's one of them. And where those ones are doubly bad is, A, if the victim finds out, A, they feel like they've had their heart broken because often they feel like they're genuinely in love with this person, and B, they've lost often a lot of money, which is really sad. There's also investment scams. So even though these things are banned, but you still see loads of them. There's loads of websites, there's loads of posts all over social media of these platforms that you can invest in, and they promise great amounts. And some of these platforms look really good. So some of them imitate legitimate platforms. Some of them offer guaranteed returns or offer high returns. So people feel attracted to those because they look good, they look real, they look legitimate. And people think, great, this is a chance to get out of poverty or to make some money or to boost my savings. So people fall for those. So there's a whole range of scams. The newer trend is in, especially when you're looking at how AI and deepfakes can be used. So you've now got scams where people go often on LinkedIn, and send a request or pose as recruiters and say, we've got a really good job for you. Here's a job offer, or here's an investment offer or so, and either infiltrate companies or send PDFs or send documents that contain malware, and then steal people's crypto that way. So there's a whole range of scams. And I think what people have to be aware of is scams can be anything. Malware is a massive, massive thing. So if anyone holds crypto, the range of ways that scammers can get to you by messaging, by sending an email, and it's often emails that look routine. They might pose as an Amazon delivery, or we hear a lot about the parcel delivery scams, or it might just be a message that looks completely routine that gets you to click on a link and you lose crypto, or it's building up a relationship. So what I think people need to know is the range of scams out there is so vast, and many of them look so real and so legitimate, and often imitate 100% real, legitimate companies or platforms. You can't trust anything. If you get any message, always click on the email address to see who it's actually from, or find out. And I think, you often hear people say, "Oh, I wouldn't fall for one of those scams."
A lot.
That wouldn't happen to me. Fallacy. So a lot of the smartest people have fallen for scams, but also it's almost impossible now not to. So what I think is interesting is when you go back from what are all of the scams and go back to who are the scammers, you've got the most sophisticated organized crime gangs in the world running a lot of these scams. They've got immense resources. I mean, we're talking billions of dollars of resources, the best people, all of the best technologies. You've got AI tools and deepfake tools that can impersonate anyone, that can change any voice, that can change any video, that can change any image, so that you can't tell what is real and what is not. I've seen a lot of demos of AI tools being used to bypass KYC, so know your customer, or being used to sort of shapeshift change to show who they are. You can't tell the difference. There's been deepfakes of people I personally know. You cannot tell the difference between the deepfake video and the real person. So that makes it really hard. And then you've got entire compounds full of people forced to scam. So there's a huge human trafficking problem, mostly in Southeast Asia, where people apply for jobs, think they've got a real job, fly out to typically Southeast Asia, get picked up, and then they think, great, I'm going for a new job, I'm going to support my family, and then basically get bundled into a van, their passports and documents confiscated, and then locked up in these prison compounds. They're held as prisoner, they're tortured, often electrocuted, beaten, sometimes killed if they don't meet the targets. They get scam targets. So you've got an enormous, basically, albeit prisoner, but workforce of people running these scams. And then you've got people paying to learn how to scam. There's scam schools, you pay tuition fees, you learn how to scam. And what all of these scam groups have got, from the organized crime gangs that run them to all of the hundreds of thousands of people held prisoner in these scam compounds, to the people paying to learn how to scam, is you've got these basically Bibles. They're like scam guides of how to scam. And they give you scripts of, this is what you say, this is how you say it, this is how you message as if you were a 20-year-old woman, this is how you message as if you were a 50-year-old man, these are the answers to these questions, this is the type of question you ask, this is what you do to get someone to fall in love with you, this is exactly what you do to get people to believe you. And it's all tricking human psychology, it's all tricking human vulnerability. So when you take all of that immense data that they've got on how to scam you, plus all of the AI tools, plus 80% of us have got our data leaked on the dark web. So anything anyone really wants to buy about you is available. That might be where you live, where you work, what your interests are, what your hobbies are. People give so much away on social media. So they've got so much personalized information about you that they can use. So often when a scammer calls and goes, I'm from your bank and I know this information about you, and I know that bit of information about you, and I know where you live, and I know your name, and I know everything about you, people think it's real because they've got so much information about you. So when you take all of those factors together, it basically means that you can't trust anything. So what is a scam? It could be, sadly, anything. You really can't trust a single phone call unless you know exactly the person who's calling, or any email or any message or any website or anything.
Yeah, I mean, I think you make such a good point that there is a lot of emphasis put on the specific risks around technologies like cryptocurrency, and from a sort of policy and risk side of it, AI is certainly treated like this very new thing, but actually the principles of how these scams operate are exactly the same as any of our traditional financial crime scams, and they're not specific to cyber or AI or crypto. I'm interested, Rebecca, from your sort of dark web research hat, and I'll put you on the spot here. Have you seen this come up a lot in those sort of forums and conversations, particularly around crypto and particularly around those sort of much larger amounts of money being scammed?
Well, it's like what Erica said. I have seen these guides that explain how to find victims, what to say, how to behave. we see details and stuff that's been stolen, particularly through info stealers and other types of malware, that is accessible and available to buy on the dark web. It's readily available.
And for very cheap.
It is, yeah, surprisingly
me,
so.
yeah.
Considering the value of some of these crypto wallets in particular can be significant. But anything is up for grabs when it comes to the dark web. In the same way, like Erica said, if you wanted to find out about a particular person, to target them, say they were of interest, there's so much available that you can find out so easy and so quickly. I think the thing that I find hard about cryptocurrency in particular is that it doesn't stop at it being just one conversation with one criminal. It's not just a small ecosystem, it's so vast. And where you were talking about human trafficking and all that side of it too, it's not just one person attacking one person or one person picking one person. It's a whole ecosystem.
It's an enterprise, really.
Yeah, very much so.
At the heart of it.
So we're going to move on to the next question just to keep up the pace. So your book, Erica, Crypto Wars, for anyone wanting to do a cheeky Amazon purchase, explores power, money and control in the crypto ecosystem. What's the biggest misunderstanding people have about what crypto actually promises versus what it really delivers?
So there's a few big misunderstandings. The first is because it's on blockchain that you can trust everything. And in theory, that's true. The way the technology works, because it's on blockchain, you should be able to trust anything. But you have to understand blockchain analytics and to be able to sort of to read it and to see that, to know that for yourself, to see that for yourself. But also people lie. And a lot of platforms that people have said, oh, this is on blockchain, therefore it works, or this is crypto, therefore it works, therefore it can be trusted. If the people running the platform are acting fraudulently, then it doesn't work. And, we've seen scams where they say, oh, invest in this cryptocurrency. The cryptocurrency doesn't exist. Invest in this platform or blockchain. The blockchain doesn't exist. Or invest in this product or keep your money here and we'll keep your crypto safe in one of our wallets. And in theory, that would be true. And one of the great benefits of crypto is that you can control your own wallet where you can look after your own crypto. But if you're sending your crypto to a centralized platform, you're trusting them. And where some of them say, oh, we'll keep your crypto safe, we'll keep it in its own wallet. And then they basically get your crypto sent to one of their centralized wallets, then it's their money and you're trusting them. So the first thing is you can't trust it because there's people behind it. So yes, you can trust a technology if you know how to look at the technology, but you can't by default trust a blockchain or crypto platform or company because there's people behind it, and often those people aren't acting as legitimately as you want. Not always, and not in most cases, but in some cases. I think the second misconception around crypto, or one of the sort of myths that sometimes spread, is that decentralization is great, and if something's decentralized, you can by definition trust it. So decentralization is great. It's a phenomenal way of not having to rely on one entity. It's a much more secure way because it means that if one entity is hacked, then you've still got sort of the access codes to that spread out in lots of different platforms. So it's much safer and it is much more trustworthy. But again, there's decentralization and decentralization. And we've seen a number of platforms claiming to be decentralized that aren't decentralized at all. And in fact, it's one person controlling the funds and then often misappropriating those funds. So again, just because something claims to be decentralized, if it actually is decentralized, that's really, really good. But don't take that at face value. Do your own investigation. The third one is privacy. So privacy is great. I'm the biggest proponent of privacy there is, and we need privacy. This is a time when governments are inherently bad. Surveillance is a massive thing. There's huge risks, and also not just from governments, but there's huge risks to all the data that's out there that can go into criminal hands and be used against us in scams. So as pro-privacy as it's possible to be. And one of the things that crypto promises in some ways is privacy. But the main misconception is that crypto is private. So Bitcoin, when it was created, it's never been intended to be private. It's sort of pseudonymous. There's ways of buying and sending crypto without revealing your real name, but there's still a digital identity. And Bitcoin transactions now are fully traceable. And you've got these phenomenal blockchain analytics tools that can see the history of transactions and where that money's been. Cryptocurrencies that claim to be more private and some that are more private, but they're still not 100% private. So one of the lessons that some early users got, and there's been a number of people, and partly why a lot of the early scams, such as, for example, especially in about 2017, there was a lot of scams and a lot of ICOs, so initial coin offerings that promised great things. And a lot of the reason why there's been some of the earlier crime and scams in crypto is because people thought it was private. And early on, when Bitcoin came about 30% of crypto's use case was allegedly for buying drugs on the dark web, because people thought, great, I'm sending this digital money, it's private. And then what happened, these crypto analytics tools got invented. So you could always manually trace transactions, but it took a lot of effort. But now you've got these crypto analytics tools that can go back through an entire history and go, well, that Bitcoin was used to buy that drug on that dark web. So there's been a number of arrests more recently for crimes that people committed using crypto 10 years ago, when those people thought, oh, this is 100% private. It isn't private. So it's not that private.
I think that's what's interesting, is that particularly with my cybercrime hat on, if you're using crypto for legitimate reasons, to pay for legitimate things, to maybe send it to family, like we spoke about earlier, that's very different to when you're using it with malicious intention to pay for things that you probably shouldn't have. And that's where being able to track the transactions, being able to tell that story can be so helpful when you are working in law enforcement, when you are doing your research.
Well, yes, and with a caveat that one of the benefits of crypto is that there are ways to send it more privately if you're, sending things via a certain, like, for example, the Tor browser and via VPNs and so forth. So the caveat is some of the things, England is not perfect, but, we're relatively safe here. But there's countries in the world where you can't do things legally or safely that we would feel here that one should be able to do legally or safely. There's countries in the world where if you're an investigative journalist, that's quite dangerous. If you say something against the ruling government, that's quite dangerous. If you're gay, if you're the wrong religion, if you're the wrong ethnic minority, where wrong being in the definition of that government. So there's a lot of places in the world where things that we would consider to be acting good and acting legitimate, such as maybe reading a religious textbook, maybe that's escaping domestic violence or an abusive situation. There's a lot of these use cases for crypto where the privacy it brings is literally life-saving. Mm-hmm. And, it's easy to think, sat in England, oh, well, this good, that bad. Not necessarily. So I think that's a really important caveat to make, and probably the most important actual use case of crypto, that it can provide a workaround to escaping or to getting around some potentially really dangerous situations.
Yeah, I completely agree on that. And I think as someone that works a lot in the privacy space, there's actually a lot of misunderstanding about the benefits and drawbacks of privacy. And I think we have such a privileged view in this country because quite often, as you say, a lot of the general living practices of our society do not apply in every other region. I'm going slightly off piece with my next question because I'm very interested in what you said around that sort of personal awareness piece, because I certainly see a lot of benefit of crypto. And as someone that works in technology, I think I'm clued up enough to understand, or to at least be able to look for those risk factors and those signs. But there's clearly a piece around digital literacy where there is going to be some disparity with certain populations, particularly with older people, around knowing what to look for. What kind of education do you think is needed for people to upskill themselves so that cryptocurrency can be used more widely? Because my concern would be with even my parents, that perhaps they've not grown up in the same sort of world I have with the access to the technology that I have. And so my concern would be, well, not necessarily falling for scams, but not necessarily also understanding blockchain or that sort of, that entire process.
So I think it depends what the priority are. I definitely think for young people, just doing things like getting an account maybe on a crypto exchange and buying, even if it's a tiny amount, just 10 quid, and sending that as a transaction. Get a crypto wallet and play with it. Send yourself some transactions, even if it's tiny amounts, just to see how it works. Because not all cryptocurrencies are the same. Some send more slowly and take more sort of money and time to send a transaction. But for example, Bitcoin, but might be more secure. Others are really, really fast and really, really efficient. So different cryptocurrencies bring different benefits. Some are pegged to the dollar or pegged to other assets, so maintain a stable value, as some are really volatile. So there's different platforms. So I think to someone younger who might be looking at a future where this is more of money, play, just experiment. Not about putting a lot of money in, just about having the experience of playing with the wallets. If it's parents, hey, if they want to do the same, great, but not necessarily. So I mean, I think if I think about my parents, probably they're never going to be interested to get a crypto wallet. Probably they will have no need to. But for example, I spend a lot of time going through with them, this is a scam, or this could be a scam, or this is what a scam could look like. So they're really well trained now. If they get any message, they show it to me and go, "Can I open this?" And usually the answer is no. So I think it's depending on what the use cases are. But one of the things with scams especially is a lot of, especially more vulnerable people, think if somebody phones you, you have to answer. Well, no. If somebody phones you and you don't know the phone number, in most cases, there's zero reason to answer that phone. Or if you do answer and you're not sure who they are, hang up. It doesn't matter. It's not being rude. So I think there's a lot of vulnerability thinking, well, if a phone call says they're from the bank, or if a phone call says they're from this phone company, it must be true. No, not necessarily. You can't automatically trust that. Or if a newspaper says it must be true. No, not necessarily. If a government person says that, it must be true. No, not necessarily. So I think, especially with older people, there's more inherent trust in these things.
Yeah.
And I think that the main thing now is you can't trust anything. But also with AI and deepfake tools, even if there's a video of something, you can't necessarily trust that is that person.
Yeah. I mean, my mum, in the organisation she works in, they have had deepfakes made of their senior leadership team, very convincing deepfakes as well. And so I'd like to think I do the good fight on the cyber awareness training in my family, but anyone can fall for it. And I think the advice you give, particularly around the experimental part of cryptocurrency, is interesting, because you're not saying everyone has to use it. This is exactly, there are some use cases where it's just not right for people. I can't imagine my parents might ever use it, but I think it's important that sort of our generation and our children's generations do have that sort of comfort in being able to use it, because we don't necessarily know what technologies are going to be adopted on a wider scale, but I can see the rise in cryptocurrency and the use of cryptocurrency and why that's important. And I think the trust thing is so important. Like, we speak so much about zero trust architecture, and we can implement all these controls at a technical level, but the sort of people side is quite hard, because we often see, and we see a lot in sort of social engineering, people feel rude by hanging up, or people feel that they're doing something wrong if they're not engaging. And actually, the best thing you can do in that scenario is hang up and validate via a legitimate channel. What I quite like with my bank, because I bank with Monzo, is that if I'm on a phone call whilst I open my banking app, there is a banner that says "We are not calling you," which I think is really interesting. It's that just-in-time notification that a lot of platforms are now starting to adopt to stop people from being scammed.
Yeah, what I quite enjoy for both of you, or for all of us actually, is that we're our own family's technical support. I often am getting questions from my own family, particularly my mum and dad. And in a way, I really hope they don't explore crypto, because I think it would add a whole other depth of problems.
It's a new
it may
job.
be in my life, but I am a dabbler. I will say that I think it was probably about 2 years ago now, got myself some cryptocurrency just because I wanted to understand, because it was one of those topics where everyone was talking about it, but I didn't really know how it worked. And I wanted to see what the platforms were like and how safe it would make me feel, and what information they'd want from me. So again, as for anyone listening, there is not a fortune in there. You're literally wasting your time. But
oh, what is someone targeting
if
you?
someone wants it, I think there's 20 quid in there. But it's definitely been a learning journey. And so, like you said, I think if you want to explore it, pop a tenner in there, see how it looks and feels, understand what they want from you. And like you said, the wallets and the transactions, because it is a good learning opportunity.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, well, sort of getting on to the last question then, and one that I'm very excited to talk about. So we have to talk about it because I think it's so exciting, is your TEDx called Meet Your Scammers, This Is How They Get You. And you talk about the industrial scale of modern scams and cybercrime, which I think we've touched on briefly. And I think what you show is that it's not just hackers in hoodies, but instead it's actually these very vast, expansive crime operations which target people all around the world. What was your inspiration for your TEDx, and what's the key message that you wanted people to take away from it?
I'd love to say it was really inspired. They reached out to me and were like, we would like to do a TED talk about crypto. Would you like to do it?
I mean, that's valid.
So you don't say no to that. So no, there was no inspiration whatsoever on my part. It hadn't occurred to me. They just reached out and asked me to do it. So I thought, okay, I won't say no.
That's so interesting. So if you can give us sort of the high level on what you spoke about, because, I mean, we've both seen it, but for the benefit of our listeners.
Yeah. So I spoke about, I'll try and remember what I spoke about now. The different types of scammers. So be that the organised crime gangs, the scammer schools where people pay to learn how to scam, the scam compounds, and basically the different demographics of who might be trying to scam you, and then some of the social engineering tricks that they use to convince people, and how they use AI and how they use these sort of psychology to get people to fall for them.
It's a scary process doing a TEDx. Did you, obviously having done one myself, how did you find the actual process and obviously the planning, the prep and the day?
I definitely was nervous. I definitely was nervous on the day. The planning was all fine, and the people who organised it were lovely. I was very nervous on the day.
But what a testament, though, to your work and your brand and your efforts for them to ask you. And as a subject matter expert, that's a huge pat on the back. So well done to you for putting yourself out there and actually creating a piece of content that can make a really big difference. So can you believe it? We've had a proper whistle-stop tour of a podcast today, but we do have one last thing to talk about, because as you said in the beginning, you are a very, very busy person. So before we do let you go, we know you're in your preparation stages for your amazing test of resilience in 2027. Tell us everything. How is it going? How are you feeling?
Antarctica?
Yes.
I
can't something else.
I'm so excited. I'm so ridiculously excited. And also part scared and totally intimidated by how much I've got to do. So it came about, I'd always wanted to go. I've had a lifelong obsession with deserts and just remote places and places where you can't see anybody for days on end. I just love it. And I'd always wanted to go, and it's not cheap or easy to go to Antarctica. And I met a polar explorer who'd gone solo, which in solo is hard. That's mentally hard. And basically spent an evening grilling him on how did you learn, how did you prepare, how did you train, what was involved. And I realised, so he'd never skied before. I'd never skied. He'd never done anything like that before. I mean, he's now done a whole load of polar things. But he learned how to ski. He did this course, he did that course. You have to do a polar survival course and all these things. And I just realised, okay, it's just all a series of things, a series of courses, and then a substantial fundraise to pay for it. Yeah. And I realised it's all a series of things. I broke it down into little things, and I realised, okay, I can do that. And then as soon as I realised I could do it, of course I had to do it. So I'm so crazy excited. So a couple of weeks ago, I was in the Arctic on our first sort of polar training, which in my case was basically learning how to ski. I hadn't skied before, and it's sort of cross-country skiing, but you're dragging a heavy sled. So learning how to ski whilst dragging a sled, getting the sled up steep bits of hills. So that was that, and it got down to -40. So that was a good, which of my clothes work and where do I need to sort of perfect my kit. So that was sort of the first week of polar, but all of last year it was trying to do as much as I can in the gym just to boost general strength, which is going to be the next year and a half of my life. And so next up is I've got 2 weeks of polar survival training, which is just all of the practical skills in the mini expedition. I've got to go to Norway after that to basically be put on a ski machine and have some experienced Norwegian polar explorer skiers watch my embarrassing attempts at skiing and general strength and fitness and critique me and show how to get better. So we're both doing that. And then another expedition, we've got to do a Greenland crossing. That's part of the criteria for being accepted for me to go to Antarctica, and Greenland may or may not be very precarious at the moment. And when you talk to these, especially Norwegians who are just born skiing and, so hardcore and so brave, how strong I've got to get and how fit I've got to get and how much prep and training there is. And, it's not things that are easy here aren't easy when it's -40. I mean, I experienced that, and it will get colder in Antarctica. So there's a whole different way of adapting, of getting food, cooking, melting snow, to be able to heat that, to be able to eat without your hands dropping off. So there's a whole way of sort of learning how to adapt. But also because we'll be dragging 100-kilo sleds, I don't weigh anywhere near 100 kilos. So it's just the amount of strength I'm going to have to build up to be able to drag that sled up the steep bits of hills. The gentle bits of hills, probably fine, but steep bits of hills will be hard. So yeah, it's a big project and I absolutely cannot wait. And whilst, here we've got to raise a lot of money, getting to Antarctica and getting picked up from the other side of Antarctica is not cheap. So we are fundraising and getting sponsorship. If anybody wants to sponsor that, I'll be very grateful.
I mean, watching you talk about it, you absolutely light up, and I think
so excited.
I think that's so incredible. But you're almost learning how to you're relearning the things you know how to do already, but in different conditions.
It's totally different. I mean, I don't know how to ski or drag everything, but things like. Yeah, to cook. I mean, here, it's pretty easy to find food.
Yeah.
There, it's difficult. A, you have to drag it all, and B, you have to get snow, melting snow. I learned in the Arctic takes a long time, especially when the outdoor environment is minus many degrees. And then, to eat that, but eating it in such a way that you don't have to take your big mitts off, because as I learned at -40, when you take your big mitts off and then try and eat with no gloves or with only smaller gloves, your hands get really painfully cold.
Yeah.
And then, you worry about frostbite. So it's how to adapt.
Yeah, I mean, it's just incredible. I find it hard enough walking to the gym, let alone training for 18 months and then smashing that out. So that's incredible, and we'll include the links to your fundraising as part of the episode description. And I'm sure everyone would want to follow along with your progress.
Yeah,
it's called the Polar Dogs. So
the Polar
Google
Dogs.
Polar Dogs UK.
Oh, that's exciting! I like that.
Well, it's been absolutely incredible to have you, to hear obviously about the world of crypto and your experiences there, your book, your TEDx, but also to hear about your next adventure, I suppose is how I describe it.
I don't think there's a better word for it.
Goodness.
So to end, if anyone listening has any other questions relating to any topics covered in this episode, pop them over to cyberagonyants@gmail.com and we will do our best to reply there, or maybe even cover it in a future podcast. Goodbye.
Thanks.
Thank you for listening. If you enjoyed this episode and you'd like to support the podcast, please share it with others or post about it on social media using the hashtag CyberAgonyAunt.
As always, a huge thank you to our guests, to Matinee Multilingual, and to you, our listeners. Keep smiling, keep shining, and we'll see you next time on the Cyber Agony Aunts podcast.